What up, everybody? It's your boy Kentario, and I'm back again for another episode of Christ and Comic Books. And today, we're going to be doing something a little different. I'm wanting to introduce something that I want to make into a series, but that's also going to depend on you guys and what you think of this video as to whether or not I'll actually go down that road. And I want to call this Could Christians View? And this is going to, I'm going to do this for anime, I'm going to do this for comic books, I'm going to do this for manga, but I also want to do this for movies, particularly animated movies, not only to say for like children, but that's a big thing, is wondering what movies are okay and not okay for your kids. For the Christians, that's a big thing too, is wondering what movies are and are not okay. And that's my premise with doing this. But first, let me start out by saying, if you like the content that you've been seeing on this channel, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button, as well as leave a comment on these videos. That way I know what your opinion is and your perspective is on this content. So thank you guys very much. Being the first one that we're doing, I actually want to do this on the topic of the movie Soul. And the reason that I want to do that is, one, because it's the first Black Pixar movie, and two, because I've noticed that that's actually something that's getting a lot of feedback when we're talking about, should a Christian watch that? Should someone that believes in God view a movie that's talking about, one, the soul, and what happens before and after your life? So that's a big thing that's coming off on across the board there, and I want to give my viewpoint on it. I've actually looked into a couple of people and their views on the video, and I'll be making some references to some of them. I've watched Paul&Morgan, which are some popular YouTubers. I've seen what their opinion is, and they seem to like it. I've listened to Marcus Rogers and his viewpoint on that, which is he's very against it. There's a lot of things that I see Marcus Rogers say no to. And the same thing goes with LED Live. I've checked them out as well. They actually have done a couple of topics on anime, which I will be doubling back to do for a Could Christians View topic. But they also did one about Soul, and they were rejective to that too. You know, Christians really shouldn't be watching this, and they list all the reasons why and what they observed. Same thing with Marcus Rogers. He listed all the reasons why and what he observed. Paul&Morgan, of course, reviewed other people's comments. They were more so on the positive side. They didn't see the hurt that it could cause, mainly because they were looking at it from the perspective of discernment. That's not to say that they were right and the other two were wrong. That's not to say that the other two were right and Paul&Morgan were wrong. But this is just pointing out that a lot of Christians are looking at this and wondering if it's okay. So let me start out by looking at this movie, first and foremost, from the standpoint of the creator of Soul himself, and that being Pete Docter. Pete Docter, he also has a video out giving the breakdown of the inspirations and what contributions were made to the movie, and I left a link down in the description for him and his video. Same with everyone else's opinion about the video. I left links for their video as well, so please make sure you check out his breakdown from Pete Docter. Check out the breakdown from Paul&Morgan, Marcus Rogers, and LED Live. As Christians, make sure you're broadening your perspective and looking into other people's opinions about these things versus, you know what, just a no. I'm just going to give that a hard no, right? Let's just hear from the people and understand that. The thing about Pete Docter, of course, I watched the breakdown, and I actually didn't do research into the breakdown before watching the movie. I watched the movie first, experienced the movie, and then I went and did that research. So not only did Pete Docter work on this movie, there was also Kemp Powers, which was the co-director. They also had Mike Jones working with him on this movie. And no, we're not talking about Mike Jones. This Mike Jones is actually the senior creator in Pixar that worked with him to produce this movie. Now, one of the things that it didn't entirely sway my view, but it had an effect on my view, is noticing that Pete Docter actually worked on Inside Out as well. And there's some contradictory things even found in Inside Out that a lot of Christians are concerned with. But knowing that makes me go, oh, okay, so that even explains why he went the route that he did with Soul. And part of that is because he's concerned with, you know, who is watching the movie and who could be insulted, or who could be disrespected, different cultures, different religions. He's taking all of that into account. Also being that he is a Christian himself. But for him to think about, you know what, I don't want to offend anybody by making my movie because, you know, I do this, basically, I'm paraphrasing, okay? So definitely watch that breakdown. He doesn't want to offend anybody, but, you know, I'm a Christian at the same time. You know, and of course, as Christians, we shouldn't be concerned with offense in the sense of we're going to stand for our faith before we go to give them what they want and sacrifice our faith in the process. We don't want to insult God trying to please others. And that's where LED Live expressed a lot of concern, because they looked into Pete Docter. So for him to operate that way makes the movie concerning to watch for Christians. But one of the things that I do at least appreciate from him is that when I watch the movie, I don't see that he is entirely forsaking his faith in it either. In a sense, he has made sure, and you can see that in his video, that he is giving a simple introduction to afterlife, and even more so, simple introduction to before life. Now, of course, with the different aspects that are portrayed in the movie, that can lead someone to go into any faith versus just going to seek God for what that looks like. But for me as a Christian watching that just stirs up that comprehension of what it is like before and what we can look forward to in the after. So I don't completely object to him being that's the route that he went to make this movie. But again, I want to give kudos to Pete Docter because I definitely enjoyed the movie. And that's where I'm at, guys. I enjoyed the movie. As a Christian, as you can see with this channel, I see God in multiple different things. Even things where you wouldn't see God in, I see him. And I value him, and I take joy in those things when it's just like, man, God is in this right here. Like even now, and some of y'all probably turn against this, I'm reading a manga involving vampires, and I'm seeing God in a manga about vampires. And it's just like, it's amazing. It truly is amazing where God can be referenced in many ways. Does it make everything that's being viewed okay? No. But it does make those things that you are checking out a little bit more interesting to see that God is referenced. Let's just do an introduction to this movie in and of itself. Because Soul is about a man by the name of Joe Gardner. Joe Gardner is currently a music teacher. Him being a music teacher has a deep desire more so to perform with music versus teaching young kids about music. So you'll see him go from teaching to going to the little jazz club and playing there. And he's meeting one of the most popular jazz players who plays the saxophone. Her name is Dorothy. He meets her and gets a gig with her. And this is his opportunity to make it big. But in him taking this opportunity to make it big, he's excited, and he ends up falling in a manhole. He ends up dying and going on to the afterlife. But he's saying, no, I don't want to move on. I want to be able to get back. He finds out he can't get back by himself. So he meets with new souls which have not been born yet. They have not been born into life. But he meets with these new souls, one of which who doesn't want to move on at all. And it sets it up to where this person who doesn't want to move on can give her past to moving back to life to him to get back to his body. And so they go through this journey together. And whereas he's changing his perspective about what's important in life and what he should pursue as a purpose, she's changing her view about what it would be like to be born into life and wants to see that through to the end. That's one of the things that's being identified in this movie. Another thing that's key too is they talk about, of course, before, they talk about an after, and then they talk about what it would be like when you're here and you get caught up in your dream. How that could be a positive and a negative. Those are some of the things I'm going to look at in this video. So first, before we get into the faith side, let's talk about the black side. And we're talking about the black side first because I think the black is first and foremost? No. We're talking about it because it is a factor to the way that the movie flowed and how it plays out. One of which is, of course, that's another thing that's also getting some kickback. You know, some people have positive, yay, we got a black Pixar movie. Awesome. No, how are you going to make a black Pixar movie and he's not black majority of the movie? You know, we're going to talk about those details a little bit, not doing too many spoilers for anyone that hasn't watched it, but we're going to talk about those details here just a little bit. So one of the things to acknowledge, yes, black Pixar movie, and they come from that standpoint with music, and that's one thing that I love that they did was they did it from the standpoint of music, and they hit on some other key pieces throughout, but one of the main things that really just blew me away was the music. One of the things that I love about black culture or black history is music. I celebrate the music. It's so beautiful when you're looking at, you know, what was taking place back then in Harlem when they were doing jazz music, when you hear about Louis Armstrong playing the trumpet and doing things that no one has ever imagined anyone do on the trumpet. I myself love to play the drums, and when you hear about different drummers when they play music back, oh man, it messes you up, man. I'm telling you, this movie with music, top tier. That's what sold me on. I'm like, man, that music is amazing. Whew, that's awesome, right? So that's what I love about the movie the most is the music, and they capture Black history from that standpoint. As well as they hit on a couple of things when you're talking about, you know, what it's like to be at the barbershop. They have a scene for that, and how it's not so basic. You know, some people portray it as it just being loud and insulting one another. No, it gets a lot deeper than that in the movie, and that's something else to respect too, that barbershop experience. I've had minimal experience with that. I didn't pay too much attention to it growing up, but seeing that play out in the movie was just like, wow, that experience is a lot more uplifting than people give it credit for. And it's a part of our culture that I think is very beautiful. The other thing they look at too is the ability for one of us to have our own business and keeping that business up and running, and that parental relationship where you're wanting your child to have more. We're going to talk about the details of the movie here in a second, but that's something that they celebrate and that they recognize too, is your family wanting more for the next generation, and seeing them have more, become more, and do more. They speak on that relationship a lot as well. There's a lot of complaint only because a small spoiler is what they do in the movie. Of course, the main character, he goes to this point of having died. He goes to this point of, I want to get back because I have something to get to. And in him coming back, he ends up, to be totally honest, he ends up getting a different body. He gets a cat's body versus his own body. Someone else is in his body. So the black guy, even though they bring him back into the movie, he's not even in himself. So for them to take him out of himself is something that frustrates a couple of people in the black community. But I don't think that's something that should rob you of completely enjoying the movie and valuing the other pieces that, again, come out of the movie. You got to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff, unless there's just too much chaff for you to enjoy the wheat, right? You don't want to be like eating out of the trash can trying to find something to eat when you're watching a movie. You want to be able to, you know, I ordered this meal, you know, I like everything except the green beans. Like that's at least how you want to be able to experience your movies, right? And so that's something that I encourage you guys to do with the black side of the movie. You know, separate the wheat from the chaff, guys. Majority of that movie is great. Majority of that movie is celebrating black culture. So let's celebrate that. Now, to me, Christians, this is a yes. This movie is a yes. And I agree with Pete Docter from the standpoint of him having to make it simple to introduce these topics to children. See, it's one thing to hope that a kid is going to learn a particular thing. Schools are going to introduce things to your kids that you don't know about, right? But you don't take your kid out of school. You don't dictate how stringent it is going to be for your kids when they're going to school. In some cases, yeah, you have some people sending their kids off to Christian schools, but in other cases, majority of kids go to public. And a lot of people are trying to show their children about God and teach them about Jesus and what it is about living this life, as well as what to expect in the afterlife. They're trying to teach that, but it's not as though they're completely rejecting what school is teaching to teach them that. Their kids are learning something in school, the kids come back with questions, and the parents teach them about that from home. And they teach them a core home value, which is, if Christians, if you got a concern with what your kids are seeing, watching, and experiencing, again, that starts with home. Not saying that starts with you telling them, no, don't watch this. It's if they get into something, learn about that thing so that you can teach them the wheat from the chaff about that thing so that they can make proper judgment. That's what I learned as a kid with my parents, and what I love about my parents is my parents taught me discernment when it came to several different types of things. Yeah, I got caught up in some things I shouldn't have, but I didn't go as far down that rabbit hole without returning to what was my core value and what was most important, which is, of course, Jesus Christ, people. So that's something that's important about household teaching. Teach your kids to discern these things, and teach them to discern with soul. Let them. I'd suggest letting them watch the movie. I'd suggest you don't watch the movie with them. They ask questions. Help them shape it. Help them shape that. Okay. Help them shape that. That would be my response to Christians watching this movie. Okay. When we're talking about the movie, there was a lot. I wanna look at them because LED Live, I'm not trying to disrespect them. I highly actually value them because it is important to be careful. What I don't like that they do in their videos is when they are talking about a topic, everyone at the table hasn't quite actually seen it or actually done a study on it. They've seen bits and pieces and well, I heard and you know, the one guy watched it all, but everyone else don't know. And when he's giving his interpretation of it, you're just like, that's making the movie. You should not be like that. No, nothing that you watch, read, or view should be taken from that perspective of he watched it, he told us about it, and that's what it is. Everyone should watch and experience, research, and then talk about something. Even if you have this is what I heard, don't close the door on the thing when you yourself haven't experienced it. And that's a lot of what I saw from them, is they were getting an interpretation and they were closing the door on the matter based off of that interpretation. And even more so, it was making their viewpoint worse about the thing without knowing it. And when I look at the movie, one of the things that I wanted to point out again is when it came to him dying, he went through this experience of going to this bridge that was going towards this large light. And of course, he ran away. He fell off the bridge. Me, instantly, I'm like, oh my gosh, where's he going? Is he falling to hell? Oh my God. Because you're a Christian, right? That's what I first thought. No, he falls to what's called the Great Before. And in the Great Before, you have these little blue blobs going around, of course, being directed by these abstract illustrations of people, I guess you could say, of men and women, directing them to different types of personality traits, character traits, I guess you could call it some negative things, because they were talking about how directing them to being like uptight or being anxious and all these other things, and directing them to them, and that was shaping them as characters, as human beings, for what they were going to be when they were born, what they were going to have when they're born. And then the last piece, as you learn in the movie, is something that they have to be inspired to pursue of their own. So they're being shown different occupations and different passions and different interests, and as they're going through and walking through this lobby to view those different things, they make their choice on what it is that they want to be and what they value. So that one thing is left to themselves, while Terry and Jerry, which is the name of these abstract beings, are guiding them to everything else, right? And so I thought that was pretty interesting. One, because I referenced back to Jeremiah 1:5, how it talks about, and I'm paraphrasing, God knew you before you were formed in your mother's womb. So there is a contribution that God makes to the shaping of you before you even go to be born, to be placed in the womb. He's there even before mom and pop come together. So to hear that and then see that in that movie, that's what I took from that. I didn't take it from, as Marcus Rogers was kind of identifying, he was somewhat leaning towards there being that transgenderism and that this is how I am, versus they're trying to promote that, saying that people are being shaped beforehand to have these traits and these limitations and these weaknesses, and I would go as far as to say God has a place in that story, in the sense that he allows for you to experience things, or he contributes to you experiencing things. Again, we know that's to say in scripture for your betterment, so they may have that being established in the soul at that point, but again, that leads to the strength of the soul, not to the downfall of the soul. Again, and I say that because you don't see a negative effect of that. That's something that we could talk about more in detail if you like. Again, comment about that. But another thing to point out with that too is that's where I see Terry and Jerry as angelic beings. I don't see those two to actually be God. I don't see them being God in that. I don't see them as deities in that. I actually see them as angels, because they have an order, they have a system, and as much as they are in charge of that, they try to not be too hands-on about that. One of the Jerrys is one that keeps count when someone's going to the great beyond. And he's very meticulous. He's like, oh, all the numbers, I gotta make sure all the numbers right. And he's one of the people that notices that Joe Gardner, his soul came off the bridge, and so we're missing a number. I need to figure out who that is. That's something for another time. But, so, when we're going back to them being in the Great Before, when we're looking at the Great Before as a Christian, again, that's God having a place in the molding, in the shaping, referencing again back to Jeremiah 1:5. What's interesting about that, actually, LED Live did a review on Jerry Terry, and they gave what that actually means from what they reviewed. I didn't find that definition, but they had one. Watch that video to see what the definition of Jerry and Terry was. But for me, when I looked up Jerry, I found out actually that Jerry also interprets to, or is a short version of, Jeremiah, which made me laugh, because I'm like, hey, Jeremiah 1:5, that's why he's called Jerry. Maybe that's an underlying way for Pete Docter to bring Jesus in, or bring his faith in, without making his faith known. And again, this sparks people to want to know about these things, and this is an opportunity for them to be led to Christ. That's what it is for me, and that's what I thought was so beautiful about that moment. So a couple of other things to look at is with these Jerry and Terrys, right? There's the Jerry that's keeping the number. Again, we had an instance where you have him getting back, but he gets back in a cat's body. Now, I talked about before how there's the one character who wants to just stay in the before. They don't want to move on. They accidentally fall with Joe Gardner, and they end up in Joe Gardner's body. Now, Marcus Rogers, he sees that as them trying to say, okay, so they're saying that even though you may have a male body, you can have a female in you. You can have a female soul because the person that's in that body is a female soul. I agree with that, but here's what changes that perspective is you have the Jerry, no matter what, making sure that he gets them back, and he succeeds in that. And you don't see that happening often in the movie. You don't see several Jerrys going down trying to restore souls that have went to the wrong body into their right body. You don't see that happening. You only see that happening one time with this one Jerry, but he ensures that because this is my responsibility, that gets fixed. Now you may question, well, the other ones didn't act like they cared. Well, that's because they knew it was going to get done, right? They knew it was going to be fulfilled. They're not so hard on the one soul that doesn't want to move on because they know eventually she'll find that one thing that makes her who she is, right? So that's something that I want to acknowledge about the movie. I don't want to go into every aspect of the movie, but that shows the management from a spiritual realm of making sure that things are the way that they're, to an extent, supposed to be. So you may ask the question, well, what about those that do feel that way? I honestly can't speak on that. I don't do a lot of research into transgenderism. But what I can tell you is, based off of this one standpoint that I want to hit on as I draw this to close, two things I want to hit on as I draw this to a close. One of which is when we're talking about what it is before and what it is after. One thing that they do is, instead of them saying, no, there is no such thing as heaven or hell, Joe Gardner in his soul form is asking the Jerrys, is like, where am I? Am I in heaven? They laugh and they said no. And so he's like, am I in hell? And they don't object to it, but they don't say, they don't deny that there is a hell. So this is showing that both places are subject to exist in this realm, but of course that's not where you are. So they don't object to that. So that's not saying heaven doesn't exist. I'm not saying hell doesn't exist. Well, why wasn't there a pathway to hell? We don't know what happens in the great beyond because they don't get into that. We don't know where hell could be. They don't get into that. So that's something to, again, say that they're laying the groundwork for introducing before and afterlife to children. And it's up to us as parents to teach that. You don't let a kid watch a movie and then that be the movie that teaches a kid the lesson without you helping shape their view. You don't allow kids to just be molded by television. And if you are, that's where there is a problem and a concern, not whether or not they should or shouldn't watch a thing point blank, period. So that leads me to scripture when we're talking about, there's a lot of different verses speaking on how when we get to heaven that we will have a new body, that we will have a new mind. But of course, not to go deep down in that should be already happening when you get saved. So when you give your life to Christ, you're given a new mind and you're being transformed from within because now you have a relationship with Jesus. So when you have that relationship and you go to move on, which is interesting because they leave them in a sense shapeless. There's not a gender shaping to the souls when they move on. They have somewhat of their old form, but they're not completely shaped. So them going to the beyond, it gives them that opportunity to see who they truly are going to become, of course, when they go through. That could be a positive or a negative. I don't want to go too deep into that. But when you see that happen, it makes you think about how when we go to be with the Father, how we're going to get this new form. One reference you can look at, Philippians chapter 3. Verse 20 and 21, how it's talking about he'll take us away from this old vile body and then he'll be giving us this new form. The other thing where you can see that as in a couple of other scriptures, I believe it's 1 Corinthians chapter 5 verses 1 through 10, you're giving an interpretation of that because there it's talking about how God is going to, he's not only, like Jesus said when he went to heaven leaving the disciples, they're going to prepare a place for you. Not only is he establishing a house, but with this new house is you're going to be getting new clothes. So in a sense of, you're not going to be coming into this new beautiful place looking old and raggedy. You're going to be developed to be able to dwell in this place. And that's powerful in and of itself because what we're doing when we're here is establishing ourselves to be kingdom people. You don't wait to get to the kingdom to be kingdom people. You establish your kingdom heart and mind while you're here, so that when you get there, you're living that life out while you're there. And those are the two scriptures that I want to give in reference to that and the shaping of the body. And again, I don't think it's a bad idea to watch Soul. I think Soul will do exactly what the creator intended, which is to establish that simple foreground, and then it's up to you as the parent to finish the painting. Hey, that challenges you to learn, right? That challenges us as leaders, as parents, as guiding lights, as Christians, to go to that next level of leading, teaching, and guiding. Because we're going to meet people that need to know who Jesus is. We're going to need to know where they currently stand to be able to then speak Jesus. We're not going to come at them with this, you shouldn't. We need to come at this with this, okay, so when you come to Christ, it's like this. This is what you experience. God allowed you to experience this so that you can now become this. I dare to say, and I hope this doesn't get me canceled on YouTube or in trouble with YouTube, but I'll tell you this: a transgender person, look, you're feeling uneasy about who you are, come to know Jesus. That'll be your transformation within you, without you having to go through these surgeries, without you having to go through therapy first before you even get the surgeries to make a change. That's difficult to come back from. Know who Jesus is. And if there's a body, a new body for you, Jesus will give you that when you get to the kingdom. You won't have to change any of this to do that. When you experience Jesus, there's a transformation within you that doesn't require you to destroy this physical. Okay? There's a transformation that takes place without you having to destroy this. You having to change this. You not having to transform this and become something that in the mirror it looks good, but still within there's a wrestling and a warring. But that's all I want to talk to you guys about is the movie Soul. I highly recommend it. Hope you guys enjoy. Y'all have a blessed day. Peace.